Because the most powerful ideas don't need to shout. They just need to be true. And when something is true, it has a way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, this is for you. I've learned over the years that life doesn't change by accident. It changes when we change, not when the economy changes, not when the government changes, not when your company changes its policies. Life changes when you do. And the starting place of that change, this is important, is not your bank account, not your address, not even your job title. It starts with your philosophy. You see, everything you do flows downstream from the way you think. Your income, your health, your relationships, your level of happiness. All of it is shaped by a handful of ideas you've picked up along the way. Ideas about work, ideas about money, ideas about discipline, ideas about what's possible and what's not. Now think about that for a moment. If your results are a reflection of your philosophy, then changing results requires changing philosophy, not tactics first, philosophy first. I used to think success was mostly about luck. I used to think some people just got the breaks. And then one day I started noticing something interesting. The same people seem to get the breaks over and over again. And the same people seem to struggle over and over again. That's when it dawned on me, maybe it's not the breaks, maybe it's the mindset. Now let me tell you a little story. I once met a man who worked very hard, long hours, no vacations, always tired. And he came up to me and said, I just don't understand it. I work harder than everyone I know, but I'm not getting ahead. And I said, let me ask you a question. Are you working hard on your job or are you working hard on yourself? He paused. And that pause told me everything. Because you see, if you work hard on your job, you can make a living. But if you work hard on yourself, you can make a fortune. Not just financially, but in confidence, wisdom, joy, and peace of mind. Now, here's the next part. Philosophy doesn't come from one big moment. It comes from little decisions repeated over time. It's formed by what you read, what you listen to, who you hang around, and what you tolerate. That's how a philosophy sneaks up on you quietly, slowly, almost politely, and one day you wake up and say, well, that's just the way it is. But that phrase has stolen more dreams than failure ever could. You see, the future doesn't respond to need. It responds to preparation. And preparation begins with asking better questions. Questions like, what do I believe about my own ability? What do I believe about discipline? What do I believe about time? Because here's what I know, you will never outperform your own self-image for very long. Let's talk about seasons for a moment, because this is one of the great lessons of life. Life and business and relationships all move in seasons. There's winter, spring, summer, and fall. And the mistake most people make is they try to negotiate with winter. They say, well, maybe this winter won't be so cold. No, winter is winter. It comes every year and it always brings difficulty, challenge, disappointment, and loss. The key is not to wish for an easier winter. The key is to become stronger. I used to complain about the cold until I learned how to put on a coat. That's maturity. Spring follows winter, but spring doesn't show up because you complain. Spring shows up because you plant. You plant when it's uncomfortable. You plant when you're unsure. You plant when the results aren't visible yet. Summer comes after spring, and summer says now you must protect what you've started. Protect your time, protect your habits, protect your focus, because weeds grow automatically, success does not. And then there's fall. Fall asks one question: what did you do with the time you were given? Fall is harvest, and harvest never lies. If you planted well, you reap well. If you planted poorly or not at all, you still reap. You just don't like what shows up. Think about that for a moment. The good news is this: you don't control the seasons, but you do control what you do in them. And that's where philosophy becomes power. Now let's go a little deeper. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. That's not just a nice phrase, it's a law. And every law works whether you believe in it or not. Discipline is simply doing what you know you should do even when you don't feel like doing it. especially when you don't feel like doing it. I used to wait until I felt motivated, and then I learned something that changed my life. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. You don't wake up motivated, you wake up human. Motivation comes after you take the first step. Here's what's interesting. The same disciplines that build success also build character. The same neglects that lead to failure also weaken character. Everything is connected. A few extra minutes of reading each day, a few extra minutes of planning, a few extra minutes of reflection. Those little disciplines practiced daily turn into extraordinary results over time. But here's the challenge. The pain of discipline weighs ounces. The pain of regret weighs tons, and regret usually sounds like this. I should have, I could have, if only I had. Now let me tell you a little story. I once met a man in his 60s who said to me, I kept thinking I had time. And I said, time for what? He said, time to get serious, time to learn, time to change. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, I didn't realize the days were expensive. Think about that. Every day you spend without direction costs you something. Every day you spend without learning costs you something. You're either investing the day or spending it. Now here's where responsibility comes in. Everything begins with responsibility, not blame. Responsibility. When you accept responsibility, you gain power. When you reject responsibility, you give power away. I used to say, if I had a better boss, if I had more money, if the economy were better, and then one day I learned a better phrase. If it's going to be, it's up to me. That phrase doesn't make life easier. It makes you stronger. You see, the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. And that conversation determines what you attempt, what you avoid, and what you become. Now let's talk about self-education. Because formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. Read books, listen to wise people. Study success not because you're broken, but because you're unfinished. I read my first personal development book because I was broke. I kept reading them because I was curious. I kept reading them because they worked. Every book you read gives you a new set of eyes. Every idea you learn gives you a new lever. And here's the key. Don't just learn information. Learn philosophy. Learn how to think. Because income rarely exceeds personal development. Now, here's the next part. Goals. Goals are not just about what you get. They're about who you become. The major reason for setting a goal is not to achieve it. It's to become the kind of person who can achieve it. That's why goals change people. Set goals that demand more of you. Goals that require discipline, goals that stretch your identity, and write them down, because a goal not written down is just a wish. I used to say, I'll remember it, and then I forgot. Writing it down turns it into a contract with yourself. Now let me say something important. You don't get paid for your time. You get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. And value is not something you demand. It's something you develop. Become more valuable, learn more, serve better, communicate better, solve bigger problems. If you become twice as valuable, you don't have to ask for a raise. The marketplace will insist on one. Now here's where lifestyle comes in. Success is not about working yourself to exhaustion. It's about designing a life with margins, a life with joy, a life with purpose. But lifestyle is downstream from character, and character is built in private. What you do when no one is watching determines who you are when everyone is watching. Gifted with a gift from God. Now let me tell you a little story. I once knew a man who wanted success badly. He talked about it all the time, but his daily habits didn't match his desires. And one day he said, I don't know why it's not working. And I said, because you can't talk your way into a new life. You have to live your way into it. Think about that. Let's continue, and let's let a little ancient wisdom step into the room with us. Because truth didn't start with us, and it won't end with us. Now, when you begin to change your philosophy, you'll notice something interesting. Resistance shows up. Old habits start arguing back. Old voices say, "Why now?" And that's when you need anchors, truths that don't move when emotions do. There's a line in scripture that says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Think about that for a moment. Not as he wishes, not as he hopes, as he thinks. That tells you everything about philosophy. Your outer life is simply catching up to your inner conclusions. I used to think change was about willpower, and then I learned it's about alignment. When your thinking lines up with truth, your actions follow naturally. When it doesn't, you fight yourself. Here's another ancient line that's worth its weight in gold. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, not by wishing harder, not by working longer hours alone. By renewing the mind, that means you don't just add information. You replace conclusions. You don't need a new personality. You need a new pattern of thought. Now let me tell you a little story. I once met someone who said, "I pray every day for a better future." And I said, "That's wonderful. What are you reading every day?" Silence. And that silence told the story. Prayer opens the door, but discipline walks you through it. There's another line that says, "Faith without works is dead." Not faith without feelings, faith without works, which means belief must eventually show up in behavior. You see, discipline is spiritual. Planning is spiritual. Preparation is spiritual. Responsibility is spiritual. They're not separate worlds, they're the same life. Now here's where seasons meet scripture. There's a time truth that says to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. That verse alone can calm a restless soul because it tells you that delay is not denial. Winter is not punishment, it's preparation. If you're in a winter season right now, finances tight, confidence shaken, results slow, don't curse the ground, strengthen the farmer. Because spring always follows winter. But spring only rewards those who prepared in the cold. Now let's talk about diligence for a moment. There's a simple proverb that says, "The diligent hand will rule, but the lazy man will be put to forced labor." That's not punishment, that's consequence. Life pays according to effort applied wisely over time. I used to look for shortcuts until I learned there aren't any. Just paths people don't want to walk. Another line says, "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might." Not halfway, not someday, all your might. That's a philosophy. Excellence is not an act, it's a decision repeated. Now think about responsibility again. There's a verse that says, "Each one shall bear his own load." That's not heavy. That's empowering, because when you own the load, you also own the future. Blame weakens, responsibility strengthens, and here's one of my favorites. When it comes to growth, train up a child in the way he should go. That verse isn't just about children, it's about training. And you are still in training. We all are. You train your mind by what you allow in. You train your habits by what you repeat. You train your future by what you tolerate today. Luke 6:45 says, "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil." Now notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say a good man wishes for good. It doesn't say a good man talks about good. It says he brings it forth, meaning eventually, inevitably, what's inside comes out. Treasure is accumulated, not accidental. Nobody wakes up one day with wisdom. Nobody wakes up one day with discipline. Treasure is what you've been storing quietly, daily, patiently. So if someone says, "I don't know why my life looks like this," the answer is often uncomfortable but simple. This is what has been stored. I used to blame circumstances until I realized circumstances are just delivery systems. They deliver what's already inside. Change the treasure, and the future changes automatically. Now here's where mind renewal comes in. Romans 12:2 says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That word conformed is important. It means shaped from the outside, pressured, molded by environment, opinions, trends, and fears. Most people don't choose their philosophy, they absorb it. But transformation doesn't happen by pressure. It happens by renewal from inside out. Renewal means you challenge all conclusions. You ask, where did I learn this? Is this true? Is this serving my future? I used to believe that if something was hard, it must not be for me. That belief cost me years. When I changed that philosophy, when I learned that difficulty is often proof you're growing, everything shifted. Renew your mind and behavior follows without force. Now let's connect that to seasons. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven." And most frustration comes from misreading seasons. People try to harvest in spring, they try to plant in winter. They try to rest in summer, they panic in fall. Winter is not failure, winter is feedback. It tells you what to strengthen. It reveals what you didn't prepare for. Spring doesn't reward hope, it rewards action. Spring asks one question: did you plant? And summer is demanding. Summer says, now protect it. Now show discipline. Now stay consistent. Fall doesn't negotiate. Fall reveals. Once I understood seasons, I stopped being angry at life. I started cooperating with it. Now discipline. This is where most people want inspiration instead of instruction. Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." What does the phrase "do not be deceived," which tells you self-deception is common? People say it'll work out. That's not a plan. That's hope without strategy. Sowing is intentional. You choose seeds. You choose ground. You choose timing. And here's the key. Reaping is multiplied, but it's also delayed, which means discipline must outlast emotion. I used to quit too early. I stopped just before results showed up. And I didn't realize that quitting doesn't cancel the harvest. It just changes what grows. Now responsibility. Galatians 6:5 says, "Each one shall bear his own load." That verse isn't harsh, it's dignifying. It says, your life is yours to steward. Your growth is yours to manage. Your future is yours to prepare for. Blame feels good for a moment. Responsibility feels heavy at first, but then it feels powerful. The moment I stopped asking, why did this happen to me, and started asking, what can I learn from this, my life accelerated. Now, vision in Proverbs 29 verse 18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Perish doesn't mean die, it means drift, it means lose restraint. It means live reactively. Without vision, you say yes to things that steal your future. With vision, decisions get simpler. And that's why Habakkuk 2:2 says, write the vision and make it plain. Writing clarifies. Clarity creates focus. Focus creates momentum. Finally, let me leave you with this one because it ties discipline, character, and destiny together. Luke 16:10 says, he who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. Great lives are built in small rooms, early mornings, quiet decisions, unnoticed effort. Before the harvest, there is always faithfulness when no one is clapping. So as you move toward 2026, don't look for a miracle year. Look for a mature philosophy. Change how you think. Change what you store. Change what you practice daily, because life is fair, but it's exacting. It gives you not what you want, but what you prepare for. Think about that for a moment, and then set a better sail. Philosophy is the root system, and whatever is growing in your life right now is simply showing you what's underground. Now here's something most people never slow down enough to realize. You don't drift into a good philosophy, you drift into a poor one. Drift always works against you. Growth is always intentional. There's a quiet warning hidden in Hebrews 2:1. It says we must give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard, lest we drift away. Notice the language, drift away. Nobody plans to drift. Nobody schedules it. Drift happens when attention fades and discipline relaxes. I used to think as long as I wasn't moving backward, I was fine. Then I learned there is no neutral ground. You're either growing or you're slowly sliding.